welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am pumped to have Matt Freedman on the show. He is the head of betting at Fantasy Life. He is a fantasy and betting expert, and I'm pumped to talk to him. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ed. Always a pleasure to catch up during the season.
Yeah, for sure, and we have so much to talk about in the NFL. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. I bring you insights from sharp people like Matt Freedman. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting information. That's thepowerrank.com. Matt, let's get right into it. Is there an NFL bet that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, a few catch my eye. I still think that Pittsburgh is underrated in the market. And so Pittsburgh as a 6.5 point favorite, I think is bettable. I have this projected on the other side of 7. I have this projected at 8.25. So going through the key number 7, I think there's significant value here for the Steelers. And a lot of it is just kind of power ratings difference, but you can also look at, the kind of quote unquote situational spots. Like this is a Mike Tomlin spot going against a team in division that just beat them 2 weeks ago. The Steelers at home, this is, I think, a spot where the Steelers don't overlook the Browns the way that they maybe did a couple of weeks ago. So I do think there's value there. And then in the prop market, I would say, I don't know when this episode will be released, but we're recording this in advance of Thursday Night Football. I do think that there are some opportunities there. So something like David Montgomery, anytime touchdown, he scored a touchdown in 9 of 12 games this year. And then in the SGP markets, getting some inverse correlation by taking the under on his rushing yardage. This is something that I've tended to do more of. I first kind of thought about this last year with Christian McCaffrey by taking the under on his scrimmage yardage and betting on him to score an anytime touchdown, because those are inversely correlated, but I don't think they're actually all that inversely correlated. And different sports books price that inverse correlation in different ways. And so I think if you line shop, you can see like, oh, wait a minute, this one pretty major sports book gives maybe more of a benefit to the bettor than it should if you are entering SGPs with inverse correlation. So like with the David Montgomery example, I think what matters for Montgomery scoring a touchdown on Thursday Night Football is not really the number of yards he gets, but the number of carries inside the 5-yard line that he gets. And I would say something similar, thinking about another game, Eagles hosting the Panthers, Eagles big favorites. Jalen Hurts scores a touchdown at this point basically every week. And this won't be the last time on the show we talk about Jalen Hurts, but I would say betting on him to score a touchdown and then taking the under on his rushing yardage, there's probably some extra value there, because even if those two markets are correct, I think that the books, and one book in particular, probably misprices the inverse correlation, and that provides some value for the bettor.
Yeah, let's just say who the book is. It's FanDuel, right?
It's FanDuel.
The one that's been making all the money on these same game parlays, and good for them for doing that. But it does lead to some opportunities. Matt, I love that you have mentioned this. I think, I don't know if we talked about it or I got it from some of your content on social media or some of your awesome work at Fantasy Life, but we first talked about this for the Super Bowl, right? And we had McCaffrey anytime touchdown score and then under his rushing yards. And I think you bring up a good point. Like the point is like those two markets could be spot on, right? And it's just the fact that you're mispricing the correlation is what gives it value. That bet in the Super Bowl lost, unfortunately, but it's only because the game went into overtime. McCaffrey gets a couple extra carries. I think the process was really sound. I was prepping for this yesterday and reading your analysis of the Thursday night game, and I bet the David Montgomery anytime touchdown score and then under rushing yards. And I like that one even more just because he's a little bit dinged up.
Yeah.
So you can see a situation where he gets some carries, Lions go down and score the first drive. He gets that critical carry, and then maybe Gibbs gets more of the work for the rest of the game, whatnot. So I actually got a better price than you did. I think I got like plus 300 on it.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
shout out you.
yeah. Well, no, not shout out. I mean, just luck of the draw, right? Luck
Yeah.
that I happened to be looking at your stuff yesterday. So, but I guess the point I want to make is that it's not like either of those markets individually are off, right?
Yeah.
It's just that this is something that we can take advantage of until FanDuel gets smarter and doesn't do it right.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I would love to be on the right side of those separate legs anyway with my projections, but even if I'm just at the market with my projections, I feel like there's enough excess value created with the inverse correlations to make it worth it, but always, still trying to get on the right side of the individual legs.
Excellent. Can you just give us a quick overview about how you would project a running back like David Montgomery for his rush and then maybe his touchdown market?
Yeah, so it all starts with a top down approach of kind of saying, all right, this game has a total of 51 and a half. The Lions are favored by 3.5. And then so from that number, I can get the total number of points that I would expect the team to score. And of course I have my own projections in there. So it's, a combination of, my projected points and the market implied points. And then from there, just kind of breaking it out in terms of, all right, a team in this situation favored by 3 in a high score, or favored by 3.5 in a high scoring game, they tend to have this type of split when it comes to dropbacks and running the ball. And you start to split out of like, okay, in this game state, you would project David Montgomery for X number of carries and Jahmyr Gibbs for Y number of carries based on what we have seen from them to this point. And then you can make some adjustments, some small adjustments, given the opponent that they have. But for the most part, you're starting with that top-down approach, trying to get the number of points and look at the game state. And then that starts to dictate to you the type of usage that you would project for the individual players on a team.
Excellent. And do you find that the usage, I guess, in particular for touchdowns, but
Yeah.
I guess for like rush share or target share as well, is that pretty predictive? Especially now that we got 13 weeks of data in the NFL. Like if we just look at target share or rush share, that projects pretty well going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there will be certain situations to where it's like, okay, the Lions, and I would say last week's Thanksgiving Day game was an instance of this. Even though that game ended up being close at the end, the Lions were ahead, significantly ahead for a lot of that game. That was a David Montgomery game, right? That was part of why we saw him get 20 plus opportunities in that game. This game would be more of a Jahmyr Gibbs game in that we would project it to be a little bit closer. And so that is why I do like the under on his rushing yardage, but it's a high total of points. And so you would still project a certain number of carries inside the 5, inside the 10 for the Lions, and a certain percentage, a high percentage of those carries you would allocate to David Montgomery.
Interesting. So it's not just looking at carries, but it's looking at carries in the red zone and in particular.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. That makes a ton of sense. Thank you for that, Matt. Let us go back to predicting things for the team. I wanted to ask you about old quarterbacks, guys like Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins that my numbers liked for parts of this season and really haven't looked that good. But we might as well throw Jameis Winston in there as well because you talked about Cleveland at Pittsburgh. On a team basis, when you are making projections for these games with these old quarterbacks, how are you going about doing that? Is it a math thing? Are you making more subjective adjustments there? Because especially for Winston, the sample size isn't huge, right?
Yeah. So, man, it's such a good question. So, thinking of this more on the player level in terms of like projecting like their yardage totals and stuff like that. I've been too high on the older quarterbacks. So all three of these guys that you mentioned are pocket passers. And so that might also be something that kind of factors into this. But I've been too optimistic for the season, the entire season on Rodgers and probably Cousins as well. And that has bled into, or maybe stemmed from, the top down way in which I look at the Jets. I've been too high on the Jets. And even this week, in a total right now, actually, let me see. The spread for the Dolphins hosting the Jets is 6.5 across the industry. I have this projected at 4.5. I'm too much on the Jets, and I know that. Like, even though my projection is showing some theoretical value on the Jets, like I'm not betting that number. And maybe you can be like, well, like the difference from 4.5 to 6.5 isn't all that great. It's not passing through like 3 or 7 or something like that. So like you can sort of justify not really betting it. I don't think it's a massive edge, but man, I'm not adjusting enough on the Jets. With Jameis, it's different because he is always Jameis Winston. Like he is
He
always
is.
going to be aggressive throwing the ball downfield. Like we know this. So even though his sample with the Browns isn't large, like his body of work is significant enough to where I feel decent projecting him with the Browns. And as a result, kind of projecting the entire Browns offense. So with Winston, I think it's kind of business as usual. With Rodgers and with Cousins, I probably have not been quick enough to adjust them down.
Yeah, for sure. But like, how do you do that? Is it for you? I mean, look, I have the same problem. I mean, I have Miami by like a point and a half, right? Which is clearly off market, and I've been way too high on the Jets the past couple weeks. Bet them and liked them a lot last week, and that didn't work out. So I like you, I'm not betting them again this week, but I guess I just don't know. You know, I'm looking. I do a lot of stuff in terms of passing success rate, and the numbers have come down uh, on Aaron Rodgers, right? So I would project him to have about a 40% passing success rate against an NFL average team, and that's worse than the 42.5% NFL average. So he's worse than NFL average. That makes a lot of sense, especially how he's played lately. Kirk Cousins is the one that is kind of more of the problem because I actually have his expected passing success rate at 46%. And you take that game last week where he was actually successful on a lot of plays, but also put the ball in danger every
Yeah.
time he wasn't and threw 4 picks, right? So that like I guess how are you how do you handle quarterbacks in general and then how would you make an adjustment for like a Rodgers?
So passing yardage in general tends to be pretty stable. Like year over year, and we'll say like kind of chunk of the season to chunk of the season. So like that's the good news where like quarterbacks are not generally all that hard to project. With Rodgers, I think there just needs to be a sort of manual adjustment a little bit where it's like I'm going to be a little more pessimistic than usual. Like
Yep.
I'm going to give less weight to what he did in his final season with the Packers and more weight to what he is doing right now. And then I will also say this kind of recalls something that I remember Dr. Eric Eager talking about a couple of years ago. Like I think he would start to put like a deduction on some teams at the end of the season to where it's like, if you had a power rating for this team, just kind of based on what you have seen from this team to this point, you would maybe rate this team as like, we'll say neutral. You would maybe give them a 0, but this is a dead team, you know? And so like you should not give as much weight to what you have seen uh, for the season and give more weight to the recent fact of like this team just being absolute dead, like, and kind of projecting forward a little bit and being like, hey, I need to put my thumb on the scale of this power rating a little bit. And that's like a subjective thing. And we might be there with the Jets to where just like,
Yeah.
I think they are one of the best 3-9 teams that we have ever seen,
Sure.
but they're still a 3-9 team that is without a coach, without a general manager, and with a quarterback who generally seems to be disliked by the fans, the media, maybe a lot of players on the team at this point. Like maybe this team is just dead. And I just really need to skew against them in the power ratings and a little bit of the player projections.
Matt, are you also planning on a a a drinking party when this Netflix Aaron Rodgers documentary comes out in a month.
I mean, I don't need much of an excuse to have a drinking party anyway, but I mean, it's going to be, I don't know. It either feels like it's going to be amazing television or just absolutely terrible.
Right. Right.
Either way might be really interesting.
I feel that way too. I actually don't really want to spend another hour with Aaron Rodgers in my life, but this looks interesting enough to make an exception. All right, let's move on. We got Chargers going to the Chiefs in a really big AFC West matchup. How do you see this game playing out?
I really like the under in this spot. And to give like some insight into my process, like I am not a big money better. And so for me, it's more important to let users of the site have a sense of the direction I'm going really early on than to kind of try to hold that information, put it out in the market later when I can get bigger bets down or something like that. So
Sure.
I will, in our bet tracker that we have at Fantasy Life, put look ahead bets in there so that people can kind of see really early in the process, Matt is leaning in this direction on this game. So that brings me to this game, Chiefs hosting the Chargers. In the look ahead market, the total was 45 and a half.
Okay.
And that was just wrong. According to my projections, it was just wrong. And it also just intuitively, it felt wrong. And, you know, it reopened, it has moved down. It's 42 and a half, 43 now, but I still like the under in that game. I have the projection now at 41.4. So, you know, grab that 43. I think that there is some value on that number. So I see this being a lower scoring game. I think the weather situation in Kansas City is basically best case scenario, but like forecasts can change. And that is Sunday night football. And the wind isn't all that significant. It's forecast right now at 9 miles per hour, but that is like right on the threshold. I know that people talk about like 15 or 20 miles per hour as like the threshold, but if you go back and you look at the past 20 years of data and you say like, okay, what happens when we get to double digit like mile per hour as the average speed for this game? So if you kind of expanded that out and said, let's look at like 9 to 11 miles per hour, or let's look at 8 to 12 miles per hour, like when you're in that wheelhouse, the total starts to be impacted downwards. Especially when you're also in an environment that can get a little bit colder. And I think we have that for the Chiefs here. And then the Chargers on their own, they are an under team, you know, 8-4 to the under this year. And stylistically, that makes sense with who they are and how they like to play. On defense, they are really stingy. They make teams work every single play. They don't make a lot of mistakes, which means that there aren't a lot of explosive plays. Drives against them tend to be a little more drawn out. Like they make teams work to move the ball against them. And then on offense, they are totally fine running the ball and playing at a slower pace. And so that has resulted in unders for this team this year. You know, matchup in division, a rematch outdoors in December. You just put all of that together. And I think that the total for this game is just about a point and a half too high.
Awesome value on the under. Is what do you think of Justin Herbert? Is he really the promising quarterback that we all kind of think of him as when we watch him play, or is he part of your reason for liking the under?
I like Justin Herbert a lot. And I think that it has been a long time for him to, you know, not have a coach that kind of jives with him as a player. And I think he finally has that. I'll say it's still not like a perfect match because I mean, look, if you gave Jim Harbaugh like game state options and you're like, how would you like this game to be played out? Harbaugh would probably love a game that his team wins like 10-0. You know, like I think he just doesn't want to be super aggressive if he doesn't need to be. But Justin Herbert has been really good, especially since the bye week. And you know, early in the season, he was dealing with that foot injury, but since the bye week, I mean, I don't want to say like he's looked like an MVP, but like 8.7 adjusted yards per attempt. He hasn't thrown an interception since the week 5 bye. Like he is playing like perfect football within what Harbaugh wants him to do. And he's running a little bit more too, 23 and a half rushing yards per game. So I like Justin Herbert a lot. I know there's kind of a little bit of split opinion on him, but I feel like he could be doing even more within this offense, and he's doing what they want him to do at a pretty high level.
Excellent. Yeah, he. I think he's thrown a single pick all year,
Yeah.
which is not good for me because I said he would regress from his extraordinary interception rate last year.
Yeah.
But it's sad there hasn't been any market in the interception. There hasn't been any value game by game in his interception market. You figure a guy hasn't thrown a pick, barely thrown a pick all year, and you would be getting good prices
Yeah.
on the over. Really makes me sad, Matt, but it's okay. I'll get over it. Matt, you were teasing me on Twitter, so I actually really need to know the answer to this. Who are the 2 biggest contenders to win NFL MVP?
Okay. Josh Allen had an awesome game last week. The Superman reaching out for the pylon in the snow, like on a pass that he ended up getting credit for, both as the passer and as the receiver, just absolute MVP type of stuff. Josh Allen deservedly is the front runner. The best price you could find on him right now is minus 225. That might be a little short, but like he certainly, I think, deserves to be the front runner at this point. Okay. That said, if you look at the Bills and the schedule that they have remaining, it is not especially friendly. They could lose to the Lions in Detroit, right? They have that game coming up. Like, will they be underdogs in that spot? Like, probably. They could lose to the Rams this week. They're not favored by all that many points. And then when they play the Lions next week, it's their second straight road game. Then after that, they have 3 divisional matchups. Yes, those games are against the Patriots, Jets, and Patriots. Those are relatively easy games. That said, nothing is easy in division, especially outdoors, in December to close the year. I'm just saying people are acting as if it is locked up that Josh Allen is MVP, and it definitely isn't. So then you look at who is the next guy in the market. Right now, it's Saquon Barkley. Excuse me. Saquon Barkley, this feels like a repeat of Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey last year. If you had to power rank the order of like, what are the things that have been most impactful for the Eagles turning their season around and getting to this point to where they are very strong contenders for the number 2 seed and could win the number 1 seed in the NFC. I love Saquon Barkley, but he would not be top 3. Right? You had a big change at offensive coordinator. That means a lot, right? You have Jalen Hurts, who since the bye week has been playing some of the best football of his career on a per opportunity basis, right? And efficiency means a lot for these awards. QB wins or team wins matter a lot for this award. I am just saying, there are a lot of really sharp people out there who are pretending as if Saquon Barkley is more important to the Eagles than Jalen Hurts. And everyone should know that is false. And the people who are saying it, they can't even truly believe it. I don't want to name any people by calling them out, but like, there is no way that they can legitimately believe Saquon Barkley is the MVP of the Eagles to this point, right? He's maybe the 4th most important offensive player that they have. Like, I mean, and look, I hate saying that because I love Saquon, who should be an absolute lock, barring injury, for offensive player of the year. Right. All right. But Jalen Hurts, if the Eagles end up going 15-2 and getting the number 1 seed, or even just getting the number 2 seed, he should be live to win MVP. 2 years ago, if not for the shoulder injury that sidelined him for a significant chunk of the season, he would have won MVP. Last year, at the time when the Eagles collapse started, he was the MVP frontrunner.
Interesting. Yeah.
This is a dude who, if like the universe had wrinkled just a little bit differently, would have back-to-back MVPs. Like, he's been in the MVP conversation in previous seasons. He's playing as well as he did in those previous seasons. Why isn't he in the MVP conversation now when this is a quarterback award?
Right. I love it. So
75-1.
Yeah.
75-1 is where he is right now on FanDuel.
And he was 100-1 when you posted that tweet.
He was 100.
Tell us.
Yeah,
he was 100. Tell us who you were talking about. Although I probably should have figured it out because you had another tweet about how Saquon wasn't as important as and honestly, in terms of the Eagles, man, that defense is really good.
Yes.
Those rookie cornerbacks that they are putting out there are really helping this team win. And look, I love what Detroit is doing, but some of the Super Bowl odds that this team is getting, look, I think the team is great, right? One of the best offenses in the league. The defense is just so significantly better than last year. I do think probably they should be the Super Bowl favorite, but it's just like everyone's ignoring Philadelphia.
Yeah. And then I will say one more thing in the MVP market. Jared Goff, maybe. Okay, maybe. He feels like this year's Brock Purdy in that he's on a team that is a very good candidate for the number 1 seed. So that makes him very live already. And then in the efficiency department, and efficiency has historically mattered a lot for this award when we're talking about quarterbacks, he's got the numbers. He's number 1 in composite EPA and completion percentage over expectation. I believe number 2 in adjusted yards per attempt, or like very close to that. So you can make a case for Jared Goff. I just don't think anyone voting for him is going to put him in the top 3. So like, you can make a case for it. I just don't think it's going to be that compelling of a case because he's Jared Goff. Like the fact that he threw 5 interceptions in a game and the team won, that is almost disqualifying enough on its own.
That's
what
true.
I mean?
But he's been pretty good with picks, right? I mean, that was a little bit of an outlier. Before we leave this topic, though, you did mention Josh Allen's play against San Francisco. He was the passer and receiver of a touchdown pass. And it reminds me of Heisman moments, right? Like, who has a Heisman moment? Josh Allen had an MVP moment, and he had another one, right, with the touchdown run against Kansas City late in that game.
Yes.
Do you think that matters?
Yes. Like, I don't think it should, but I think it does. Like, if you are an AP award voter, you are already a journalist, right? You think in terms of narratives. And when it's time for you to vote on who is the most valuable or like the most important person of this year, it's like, who could you not tell the story of this season without? And yeah, it's like Josh Allen on the field of battle, right? With these awesome heroic moments, like he's like Achilles or Hercules or something like that, right? Like that is, I think, how people will think about him. They will remember him doing these really awesome things in moments that everyone saw. I do think that matters.
Interesting. I'm looking at the Eagles schedule, so I'm going to go bet Jalen Hurts as soon as we get off this. But so they got the Panthers, and then so the moment could come against the Steelers, right? Because they have like kind of a cake. NFC East is terrible. Final 3 games, but a moment against the Steelers, Mike Tomlin's defense. You shed a TJ Watt sack and throw a late touchdown to win the game.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it would certainly help if Hurts had a moment like that, but also at the same time, it's just me thinking about the statistics. If this team goes 15-2 and they play 4 of their final 5 games at home, right? This team easily could go 15-2. If they go 15-2, if the Lions lose one of their games, even if the Lions win out, I don't think Goff ends up getting the award. Maybe he does. But if not, I think Hurts is right there in that conversation. So it's dirty. It's not going to win. I was talking with this bet with one of the other guys at Fantasy Life, Matt Lamarck, and he was like, This feels like one of those bets where you will have great CLV and it won't win. And it's like, yes, like the final week of the season, it will be like Jalen Hurts is now 5-1. And it'll be like, oh, great bet. Amazing CLV. He's still not going to win MVP. So that is really what this does feel like.
Matt Freedman, thank you so much for your time this week during such a busy NFL season. Please let everyone know where they can get all your good work.
Yeah, you can find my good work and my bad work also at Fantasy Life. I have the bets and the bet tracker. We have the Fantasy Life Plus subscription where you can see my fantasy rankings and my fantasy or my player projections, which I update throughout the week. You can see all of that at Fantasy Life. I have free articles on the site where I highlight the fantasy players that I like the most in any given week, just for kind of like whatever reason. Basically, like they got good matchups, whatever it is. This player catches my eye, and I'm probably higher on him than I have been to this point, or higher on him than other people in the market. So check out all of that at Fantasy Life.
Awesome. And you are very active on social media, so please give everyone one of my favorite social media handles.
I am not as active as I should be on social media.
Oh, come on.
But you can follow me on social media at Matt F the Oracle. I always feel the need to contextualize that handle. I do not think I am an oracle. It's just a reference to one of the characters from The League, which is still one of my my favorite shows. I mean, how many shows are there about fantasy football? Really, just one. So there was a guy on that show named Matt Freedman. His nickname was the Oracle. Yeah, it was the first episode. This little kid, his name is Matt Freedman. He's the Oracle. So I just kind of had to take that as the moniker.
And wow, that's kind of incredible. I've known you for a long time. I've never known that story. Thank you for sharing, Matt. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can grab my free sports betting newsletter, 5 Nugget Saturdays, my curated list of tips and analytics. Check that out at thepowerrank.com. My apologies for not having a podcast last week. I meant to do a solo episode, but I got sick. But we will have more next week. There will definitely be a college football episode next week as we head into the playoff. Once again, my name is Ed Fang. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.